Okay, we'll get started. I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, May 25th to order. Our first, we do have one person on Zoom, and our first action item is to approve the minutes from our April meeting from April 27th. You had a chance to read the minutes. If there are no corrections, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, last chance for any questions or comments. All in favor of approving the minutes of April 27th, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we now have our open forums for any of the items that are on this evening's agenda. If there's anyone requesting to speak, please identify yourself and speak. Yes, sir.
Shane Haddon, 49 North Grinnell Road. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. I'll endeavor to follow the rules of conduct precisely. For the saldo discussion, last month there was discussion of relaxing the requirements for what facilities developers would need to provide when they create a neighborhood, and I hope that you would consider the idea that the township requires developers to both provide land and provide facilities to the extent possible. I also suggest that we could codify building limitations based on the actual capacity of our infrastructure, including schools, water, sewer, etc. And that we investigate the idea of assessing impact fees accordingly to developers for our school and water things to compensate for the effect of that construction.
I'm sorry.
Also, I see that there are kennel structures on the agenda tonight, and recognizing that I don't have the ability to ask questions nor comment after this period, I just have to kind of assume the worst, and if I'm off base, please apologize to the applicant. But Honeybrook Township has a bad reputation for puppy mills. One of my dogs was a cast-off breeding bitch from an operation like that. In her previous existence, she had not been adequately fed, had never had a bath, she never walked on grass, she was kept on top of her own feces, she was wearing a ratty collar that was far too tight, and when she was used up, she was left out like trash. My grandfather's dog has a similar story. Just recently, my uncle witnessed 2 more breeding dogs unceremoniously discharged from a vehicle along Route 10 before the vehicle quickly sped away. I hope I'm wrong, but I just want there to be some, I want to raise the awareness that lots of us are not interested in furthering the K-9 industrial complex. And I hope that you ask the applicant pointed questions and consider carefully tonight whether or not the Planning Commission would like to enable things like that and can take steps to hopefully prevent any animal mistreatment. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Shane. Yes.
Valerie Schultz, 165 Caitlin Court. With regards to the saldo changes, one of the things I'd like to point out, and maybe I'm completely wrong in this, and you can correct me if I am, but my understanding of the saldo current requirements is that the township can insist that a builder saves open space and not takes the fee in lieu of option only for single-family homes and not for high-density housing like we're considering for D.R. Horton. So, I'd like to suggest as part of those changes that the township can mandate the developer to, preserve that open space and not give that as an option to do fee in lieu of for the high-density housing as well as single-family homes.
Okay, thank you. Karen, we're going to move on from the comment section. Do you have any comments?
The only comment I have is in regards to Technicon. Is that the engineering company
Yes.
that works with it? Do they have a contract with us?
That's a question for the supervisors. I don't think we know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
And as far as the comments about the saldo, that isn't on our agenda and for discussion and recommendation. I don't know whether we'll get through that tonight. We'll see how the meeting goes, but we did read through it, and hopefully we'll have some discussion on that later. Okay, that concludes our initial open forum session. We're now going to move on to our land development items. The first one is subdivision. It's number 2023-3. It's the Bennual Real minor subdivision on Cambridge Road. And I guess Jen to address any of the issues. And I believe Ron is going to, we'll start out. Just get a little wrap
Okay, so Ron's going to put a plan together. You guys saw this plan or concept. They came in for a zoning variance application to create the 3-acre lot. The current limits the residential lots created from ag parcels to 1 to 2 acres. So they were creating 3, and they're also converting the existing mill house on the larger farm parcel to an accessory dwelling unit. So they received their variance to allow the 3-acre lot, and can have the accessory dwelling unit. So Ron now prepared the subdivision plan. Ron, if you just want to point out the key features on the plan, then we can hit the review letter.
Sure. So this is the location of the 3-acre lot, kind of on the northern side of the existing lot. Existing track sweeps down across Cambridge Road, mill, and the top of the meeting house, or the mill comes together. There's person ropes that were done. We do have a planning module that's been signed in DEP for that. Understanding this is effective.
Yes.
So, anything else we go? This is the conversion lot area down here.
Yeah, so
It's
down
just-
there,
It's an existing mill house that's there. And the idea is to create that for the owners to live in that house. Which, there was some zoning discussion about that and some criteria, the conditions that they applied, which were that could not be subdivided from this one. And we have those.
okay. Any questions just on the layout before I hit the highlights in the review letter? So from a zoning standpoint, it is compliant. They received the variance for the size. The only note I had in there, Ron initially listed the use of lot 1, that 3-acre lot, as agricultural for now. It's not known exactly when the owner will build on that lot. So, Ron, I believe you're going to ask for a deferral from showing the full.
Correct.
Normally, when you have the residential lot, you see the building layout, they do their stormwater management, their grading, and everything else. So in this case, since the owner's not ready to build, they don't know exactly where they want to put those features. They're asking for a deferral. Notes would go on the plan that say at the time of building permit application, you would need to comply with all the zoning criteria. They would need to show a compliant site plan for the setbacks and pervious coverage, and they would do stormwater management, and get any erosion sediment control approvals, and everything at that time. So he does need, just note on there, he needs to change that use from agricultural and just note future residential to be compliant with the conditions of that zoning hearing, that it is a residential lot. And we noted that conversion lot that you showed there on the side, that was intended to show compliance with the freestanding accessory dwelling units. We just don't need that formally on the subdivision plan, so there's no confusion in the future about that being the lot. I think everything else under zoning is just a few note clarifications, but he is able to comply with those. One of the things, if the planning commission, the board are willing to grant the deferral, the design on lot 1, we would ask them to show a feasible compliant driveway location, just to.
And the location up here on the mill, it's a very flat road and street. You can see it all directions.
Right. So,
Do we have a distance concern from Mill Road? Or we're good?
Even if it was stuck at the property line, you were 300 feet, so, or almost 300 feet to that intersection, so
Yeah.
let's see that.
I think you only need 40 feet separation from a driveway to a street intersection.
And from a site distance perspective, I don't feel that's an issue.
So that's the zoning comments from a Saldo standpoint. Couple drafting comments.
Yeah, overlook those two.
You what?
Overlook those two. They'll be great.
That's fine. There's nothing, major on there. There's a couple comments talking about showing the driveway and parking area, showing the stormwater management plan. As we noted, Ron's asking for a deferral on those. Sewage planning module was submitted to DEP this week. They had to wait for that signed zoning hearing decision to include with that. So, comment 11, for any minor subdivisions such as this, landscaping is at the discretion of the planning commission. So if you guys have any interests or thoughts that any landscaping should be provided, around the existing lot or the new lot. You can provide comments on those. That's kind of it for the review letter. So if you guys have any questions on the plan itself, on the deferral of the depiction of the improvements in the stormwater design until building permit stage, or comments on landscaping, feel free to ask them.
The new proposed lot's the only one that would change to residential, right?
Correct.
Correct. The other one's, an existing agricultural lot. As is, there's you need the 10 acres for agricultural use. You can't create a new 3-acre lot and declare the use as ag
Sorry.
to be compliant with the zoning ordinance.
This property over here has a fence around it, there's a meadow in that property there. His intention is to utilize that 3 acres, the additional acres for crop.
So the deferral, personally, I don't see a problem with that. As far as everything, I'm not familiar with this property, so what's surrounding? Is it all farm?
It's pretty much all farmland. There's a residential dwelling on the north side. Bigger picture there. On the north side of the mill, there's a house that I think that sits in a Mary Kaufman, by Mary Kaufman. Another. Yeah, this is agriculture on this side, this is cultivated, this is a meadow here. I think there's a few more houses around the end over here. Pretty much it's kind of out in the middle of those. So,
Right on the opposite side, I believe I called this property there.
Correct.
Smoker. That was Smoker's son, I went before he lived there, but that's all right close by that.
I mean, it's pretty much, I think the top of the mountain top right in this area right in here. Yeah, it's just open.
So what's your thought on landscaping?
I'm confident they're gonna have a nice when they're done.
Excuse me?
I'm confident they'll be nice when they're done.
Well, if they're gonna use it for crop farming, I'm not sure they would want trees there.
You don't want to take too much of
That was probably, they really like that 5 acres, but I guess it's gonna be a son-in-law to Ben, or the son of Ben is gonna be buying that lot. His idea is he's gonna hopefully do some of the rest of the farm as well for that's why I wanted to do this lot.
And if it don't get put in place, I have a good idea of the neck you're probably going to use for the back end.
Well, yeah, I mean,
He has been farming it that way.
yeah, I would think whatever wouldn't be used for it, so you want something.
So what I'm hearing is a consensus on, I think I'm hearing a consensus on the deferral. Is everyone okay with that? And then waiving landscape requirements. Here and there. So then what we're looking at is, in addition to those comments, would be the Technicon review letter, May 19th. And then we would be recommending final minor subdivision to the supervisor. So I guess then I'm gonna ask for a motion to recommend final minor subdivision plan for this property, subject to May 19th Technicon letter recommending deferral of land development of that lot until they decide to do something, and also waive landscape requirements.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Any questions or comments on the motion or the conditions? And are you okay with the conditions, Tom? Okay.
There is, someone's trying to get in on Zoom, can somebody let them in?
Yeah, as soon as I usually wait till we finish this discussion to not interrupt the applicant, and then I let them in.
So we have a motion and a second, there's no comments. All in favor of the motion with the conditions, signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Okay. Do you have the next one too, as well?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, put that, that's again.
We've been on a mission for IT.
Excuse me?
We've been on a mission for IT.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So the next item is the Cambridge Mennonite Church Cemetery at the intersection of Mill and Meadville Roads. I guess Ron should walk us through that since.
Yeah, this is a little more unclear for me as far as the process goes. So let me give you the backstory. So Cambridge Mennonite Church, which is about down here, is in need of a cemetery and people that are interested in having a cemetery for the church. There's an existing cemetery, the Cambridge Amish Church Cemetery is located right here. They have an agreement with the Kaufmans for an easement for this cemetery, which has been provided to the township and executed and recorded. So now we're kind of at this layout stage, and it appeared to me that for the main part of this, it was a zoning matter and not necessarily a planning matter, but it was a chicken and egg, which comes first. So we're here at the planning stage of this process. So as part of the requirements that are in the zoning ordinance, one of the requirements is a land development plan or consideration for a land development plan. If it's an expansion of existing cemetery, you don't need that, but it's not necessarily an expansion of existing cemetery. Because there's two different parties that would be controlling or administrating the cemetery as they are. The original idea for the cemetery and between the Amish Mennonite Church, the Cambridge Amish Church and Cambridge Mennonite Church was for them to kind of share the facilities, share the maintenance, share that exposure of the church. Exposure for the liability, I guess, to the maintenance and for the use of those cemeteries. So because of the ordinance requirements for parking, we put a parking area in here. Their idea was really to just utilize this area here for parking. There is a stone wall that surrounds this cemetery here, but it's with the exception of a little fence that's there, it's pretty much open between two cemeteries. So their wish would be to join together in some type of agreement with the Amish Church, Cambridge Amish Church, to provide maintenance and administer each of their own sides, but they would be go into an agreement with the maintenance of the facilities, enjoying the parking and all that sort of stuff. They really don't have a lot of parking there. I guess they just use the grass area that's there, and no one sees this as being something that's utilized, on a daily or probably even a weekly basis. I mean, it's just we just don't do that very often. But we're here to present this. We have done as well as required with the geotechnical ends of it, as far as groundwater testing and wells, and there's a whole list of myriad of things that are required by the ordinance. That's been submitted as well to the township. Brickhouse Environmental have done that work for us. So what you see here is the layout of the cemetery, two cemetery pods, and a proposed parking area. As I stated, they would kind of like to not have to put parking in there in that formal basis. If there's a stone area or something, they would put in requirements of 20 feet off the road to be paved. I don't think there's any objection to that, but I'm not sure how far they want to go with additional parking and, that type of thing. But again, that's up to the township's planning commission to either grant relief from that process of land development for the cemetery. That's an option. That could be waived, and I respectfully ask you to consider that. But there is a review letter that we have that Jennifer has done, dated. You probably have May 24th letter. So there's a few items that do need to be addressed. That one is a maintenance agreement, and that's kind of contingent upon how we look at the maintenance, whether it's a joint maintenance between the two churches or it's an individual. There's some other items that need to be addressed that's related to parking. One is the proximity of the grave sites, 10 feet from a proposed parking area, which Jennifer astutely noted that is obviously closer than 10 feet. Our parking area, which is over here, needs to be 10 feet. It's obviously less than 10 feet because of the neighborhood side. So there's a little tic-tac stuff that we need to take care of. But again, it's kind of all related to how we're going to address it, how we're going to move forward. So this is a little new to me as far as getting approval for a cemetery, but, you know, hopefully we can walk through it together.
Right, so as Ron noted, the way the ordinance reads, expansions of cemeteries won't necessarily need land development, but it reads that new ones do. It kind of talks about a process where they submit an application for a cemetery and do that geotechnical study and all that, and then you say, yes, you can have a cemetery, and then you do the land development process. Kind of seemed to make sense to submit everything kind of at once, because it wasn't going to be an overly detailed land development plan, you know, with the minor nature of the improvements here. So as I said, he did the, soil testing, all that met the requirements. So from a zoning perspective, I think the only real issue there is the 10-foot setback for the parking area, which you can actually reduce your parking spaces to 9 by 18 if you want to gain a couple feet there.
There's big trucks on this
There are, but
Yes, we can.
township ordinance says 9 by 18, so it gets you 2
We
feet.
can make it work.
But, that, and like I said, it's a maintenance agreement that gets approved by the solicitor. So they do have a legal agreement to use it. That does talk briefly about maintenance. I did send that agreement that you have thus far over to the solicitor, get her initial feedback on that. So when I get those comments, I'll forward them. So that's from a zoning standpoint. From a saldo standpoint, there's not a whole lot there's things that need to be added. There's a couple dimensions for the boundary line, bearings and distances that are missing, the normal signature blocks.
Again, I didn't know how we we're going to process
Right.
it, so if it's a recorded land development plan, or
Yeah, then
how it actually gets processed through.
Right.
I'll read to you, just so you know, what the zoning ordinance states about the land development component. It says prior to cemetery, either land development or sketch plan, where land development review has been waived. So there's options there about different ways that you can handle it within the zoning ordinance. So again, like I said, it was a chicken and egg thing. We do land development first, we do zoning first, or, because the compliance is basically the zoning, but the zoning first back to you guys for either a land development or a sketch plan, possibly a waiver of that land development.
Right, and the other section is 1016B1A says, about submitting a general plan showing your layout for the cemetery use. If it's approved, the applicant shall submit a land development plan per 22. There may be conflicting regulations in there that we can always ask the solicitor about, but
Correct.
that one says shall, and it's a zoning requirement, so
That's why we're here.
right, which is why we're here. So, I think kind of the layout plan that Ron has, would work for a simple, minor land development plan. The other couple comments under the saldo to make it compliant, just the signature blocks. And then showing the site distance and stuff for the driveway access, and then stormwater management for the proposed parking area. And then again, applicability of landscaping for a minor subdivision would be per planning commission, a minor land development, so.
So along with that, if we do proceed with this basic parking area that's around 2,000 square feet, would we be able to process this through a small projects component?
I think you could request, I think technically the small projects component talks about it being for residential uses.
Correct.
But I think the planning commission and the board could consider a waiver to allow the small area to be done as their simplified method for small projects, which is for areas up to 2,000 square feet of impervious, just extend, not just for the residential use, but allow it for this use in there. I think that would be.
You all understand what she's talking about. It's just stormwater, small project.
So what the small projects application does, instead of doing full routing calculations and everything, it takes the amount of impervious cover that's being added and requires them to infiltrate the first inch of runoff off of that entire surface into an underground, like stone infiltration bed, to help recharge the groundwater. And it controls a lot of the initial smaller storms. Most of all that runoff from those smaller storms gets directed into that infiltration bed. So.
This might be our first time of doing something like this too.
I don't know, I've been involved in cemeteries before, but never like the initial getting approval for.
Yeah, for a new one, right.
Expansions or, new layouts, or hey, we reserve this property for, future lots, can we get it laid out so that way we can, everybody knows where it is and lining the corners of the plot area. But I've never actually gone through this process, so.
How many plots would it be?
That's a good question. Yeah, 140, yeah, 150-ish would be a good number.
And are they gonna be separated, like is the Mennonite church gonna have the one section and?
Correct, the northern piece here would be Cambridge Mennonite Church, this would remain as the Cambridge Mennonite Church would be there. Yeah.
As far as maintenance goes,
Well, as far as maintenance goes, that was kind of where the two churches were working together, saying, hey, you know what, while we're mowing, let's just mow the whole thing, because truth be told, this is not going to be filled up tomorrow, it's just going to be a grass field. So the idea of, okay, well, no, let's just join in the maintenance program where they either hire someone or they have someone in the church that just knows everything, whether it's a custodian or, someone that's part of the association, one or the other, who just join in. And that's part of the requirements that the township has is, hey, prove who's going to maintain this thing so it doesn't turn into a jungle fest and not maintain it. What's the longevity, who's going to finance it, where's it going to come from, and that kind of stuff. So that's part of the agreement that I think the township's asking us to provide, which we will, making someone take care of it.
that's really between them and the solicitor to work that out.
Right, they can work it
Yeah,
out,
so
and
we'll
then we just need a document that states.
One of the things,
This is how we
the things that we can recommend are the reduced setback of the parking.
I think that's a zoning.
That's zoning.
A zoning requirement,
That's
so,
zoning. So
yeah,
that's-
you guys,
And I think we can make it comply.
yeah, you guys,
Just eliminate one bank of cemetery plots.
Exactly. There's a way to do it. We may have to reconfigure the cemetery slightly, but yes.
So we can't do anything with that.
you can comment on landscaping, and you can consider whether he can use the simplified method for stormwater.
Correct.
I think are the key things.
Let's talk about that. How do we feel about recommending that we follow the small projects, stormwater design? Chances are, if you're gonna put parking on something, the baby's probably gonna be stone anyways.
Correct. The idea probably would be that we would have some sort of
But it's still,
infiltration trench on the side that would be, a 2-foot buffer, so E plus regulation.
so what's the opinion of planning commission as far as supporting a recommendation for that? Okay, that. Okay. And then, landscaping, what are your thoughts on landscaping?
Well, I guess, how do you know where to put the landscaping, in case they want to add to that again later yet?
I would assume it would be the buffer areas, like the 12 feet between the property line and the last grade site. We have 12 all the way around.
Well, if I may make a comment, This area over here is cultivated, and some of the coffins live down here. If I were to recommend any landscaping to the board or to the planning commission, I would probably recommend something in this vicinity, which would be from the cemetery parking area to the south towards the Amish church cemetery. These two lots here are residential. Obviously, we can't do anything going close over the Amish church cemetery here. But in this location on this side, which is reserved, there's residential lots provided there. You know, if there's a landscaping buffer that you wish to have, that would screen it from the residential neighborhood.
I think there's nothing that looks better than like 2 big trees. Like a lot of our cemeteries, that's how we have it. We don't have any shrubbery around them, people want to see the stones. 2 big trees for cemeteries.
Yes, your ordinance has street tree requirements, and you can pick up street tree and put 2 in this location, that'd be acceptable.
Okay, you okay with that suggestion?
I'm good with that.
Okay, well, you're like our expert, that's why we look to you for
Well,
landscaping
and
trees.
I have no experience with Amish or Mennonite cemeteries, but the ones that my family's in, there's lots of trees. But that may not be part of the culture, so I'm not going to question that.
Are you
These
talking
guys,
like shade trees? or-
yes, shade trees.
I'm talking about 2 big shade trees.
That's where I got it.
But I'm not saying that's how it needs to be, that's just how I like to see that.
The way this is laid out, it doesn't look like there's a whole lot of room for trees other than around the edge. And then,
I mean, I'm just a little concerned about the residential neighbor here. Now they're gonna have a
On the
parking
west
lot.
side of that.
Yeah, they're gonna have a parking lot here. They may want a screen.
You see up here, looking at the aerial view, the house is sitting over here on the side of the garage. So I think for the most part, their garage would kind of, and again, it's a cemetery, so it's not like wall where I come in at 11 o'clock at night, but that was all sort of stuff. And I intentionally put the parking so that way you pull in and go towards the cemetery, as you pull into the spot, so that way it wouldn't, adversely affect things.
That was my only thoughts, if we do a row of arborvitae's on the west side there,
That's
but
what I was thinking.
that was just a thought back in my head, and I'm not saying that should be, it would give, if there's a funeral there, it would give them privacy if they desire that.
Client okay, think your client's okay with that?
I don't think it would happen either.
So you're looking for a screening of,
So you're referring to this location here
Yeah, for
first,
the parking lot.
and then possibly 2 large trees in this area? See that as a major direction?
so we really can't make a recommendation on action on the plan until, can we, until Beth weighs in on the legal side of it?
I think it can, I mean, Beth's legal side is, with regards to the agreement, I mean, the way I read the ordinance section there, it says they shall submit a land development plan, so I don't know that there's any harm in you guys recommending approval of this land development plan. You know, conditioned on that landscaping, allowing the simplified method for the stormwater in our review letter. And then if you want to add a comment in there that if the solicitor determines, land development isn't required, that you would support the waiver. But I think we've talked about this cemetery for a while, Lana and I have. And I think I ran it by her before, which is why we got to this point. But I can always ask her again. But I don't know if there's nothing's really going to change on the plan that you would see differently, making a recommendation tonight and allow him to move forward versus, waiting to see what she says about whether or not one's required.
And the distinction between those is, an existing cemetery may or may not be required for land development, whereas a new one seems like it shall be. Now, that is up to the discretion of the board, whether or not it is or isn't necessary, but the ordinance is, from a zoning perspective, which, again, you don't have jurisdiction over the zoning, and states that shall, and I concur with Jennifer on that, that shall.
So then the motion would be to recommend final plan approval to the supervisors conditioned on the solicitor's feedback, conditioned on the May 24th Technicon letter, and recommending the small projects for stormwater and the buffer, the landscape buffer that we talked about along the western boundary of the parking area, and then the two larger shade trees in the open area.
Yep.
Did I state that correctly? I think
That's everything
that's
I
what the
have.
motion would be for, if someone's willing to make that motion.
I'll make a motion for
You need a second.
You seconded it?
Are there any additional comments or questions before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion that you heard, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay.
So, as a matter of housekeeping, Ms. Jennifer, I would like to address specifically these comments, as I see there's some things that need to be added to this before we go to the board of supervisors, so you can take a look at that.
Okay.
Likewise, on the other one, there are some technical housekeeping that need to be taken care of. I would like the same delivery on that, so if you have a second chance to take a look at it.
Yeah.
prior to
If you,
motion
can you,
others.
yeah, if you can get them to me
You don't see that.
end of next week.
Yes. We'll do it.
Okay.
It's not a prior.
Yeah, okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, got it.
Okay. Our next land development item is the Twin County Business Park. The subdivision and land development submission. Yeah.
Chrissy has little sets here. Does anybody else?
Is there a review letter in it?
No.
Someday we'll get something better than I compass and copy things. Print them.
You need one or you don't?
no review letter.
No, she doesn't have them. There, so. Okay. All right, just as introduction before Mike starts, 6 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago, they originally came in with the plan to extend Westbrook Drive, and they were gonna add about 4 industrial lots off of that. That was going to be made a cul-de-sac, a little bit longer, than it is now. They got a conditional plan approval, preliminary plan approval on that back around 2017. They came back again around 2021 maybe, and were reconfiguring. They had gotten more of the adjacent lots involved, and we're looking at creating about 7 new industrial lots, which then made for a much longer cul-de-sac. And the township kind of said, we want this to connect also to Route 10, and not just be a super long cul-de-sac extension of Westbrook Drive. They now have other applicants and parties involved that Mike will talk about. So now the plan that's submitted now and is before us for review and discussion extends Westbrook Drive, creates 7 new lots. They're proposing under this proposal to develop 6 of those 7. Show all the parking, the buildings, the grading, stormwater for all of them. And then this will connect out to Route 10. And Mike can talk about what traffic configuration PennDOT is asking for out there. So, Mike, you want
Yeah, sure. So, as Jim was saying, what we were able to do is get some additional land from Ivan Stolfus, and expand from that 4 lot to, it was originally we were thinking 8, but we combined the 2 lots into one, to now 7. And then we were designing to come out and extend Westbrook Drive to Route 10, like a throughway, so it comes all the way through from 322. We have submitted to PennDOT for the HOP. We've gotten some comments back from them, so we're in the process of cleaning that up. But what they would like is this access restricted to a right in, right out, and no left turn in. When you're coming down Route 10 here, no left into the belt.
But they will allow a left out.
Correct.
Yes. Different.
So each lot will have one building, this lot will have two. Stormwater management for each lot. There is going to be a large basin in this area that'll handle all the rate controls for the whole development. And then here, this is kind of what it would look like as far as with the buildings. We are reserving lot 4 would not be developed at this point. Future, and then although it is incorporated into the storm management, so at that time we was the initial storm.
Any questions just initially on the layout or what they're subdividing there? They had submitted limited land development plan. They wanted to get initial kind of zoning review feedback, some global stormwater concept of how that was working together before they went to the fine detail of all the landscaping, lighting, and things like that. So you'll notice in the plan set, those plan sheets aren't included yet. They will be forthcoming in a future submission. So just to hit a few of the highlights in the review letter, there's the setbacks, the impervious cover, everything for all the new lots is met. There's a lot of lot annexations and pieces from the existing lots getting together, so a couple of the zoning comments are related to that, just to clearly show what you're starting with and how you're getting to the resultant lots. And so that's the bulk of the comments. There's one residual lot down that also has access off of Todd. That lot is also the one, you guys didn't see the church plan yet, where Cambridge scale is now off of 322. They're looking at, they have the land development submission in for that one to convert that building to a church and put additional parking. They had a substantial review letter, they chose not, and they need zoning relief, so they chose not to come to last month's planning commission meeting. They are annexing part of one of the, that lot down there. They're annexing part of that. So we're making sure in combination with the land that's being taken from this development and land that will be taken from that one, that the resultant lot that's left at the end does comply with zoning. So there's comments in here about that. They did wetland studies, those all identified through there. There's some floodplain at the very back of, the property behind lot 4. So that'll all be handled by DEP as part of their NPDS permit. There's some class 3 woodlands back in that back portion too, where the basins are going, so they need to show compliance with those disturbance regulations. They need to show their trash collection areas and if there's any outdoor storage for any of these proposed industrial lots. So that'll play into what type of screening and things like that they'll need to provide. They're showing sufficient parking based upon their estimated number of employees. I've asked them to put a note on the plans that at building permit stage for each of these, the parking be reviewed to make sure that whatever business actually moves in there, that their number of employees and office space are consistent with what was anticipated, and there is sufficient parking for the actual use. They'll need to show their parking lot lighting and any other site lighting, make sure it's consistent. I think that's the bulk of the zoning comments. And generally, it is compliant with zoning, it's allowed use, it's zoned business industrial, through here. And it's an extension of the existing industrial park. So, any questions on any of the zoning comments before we move on to Saldo? Okay, go ahead.
I don't like the road. I have a property on 16 Westport Drive, and I just don't like the through traffic. Is there any way that you could have everything come over Route 10 and have a cul-de-sac in there at lot number 7 or something like that, so you didn't have to connect it very long to Westport? So we now already have, so if there's a through road, my concern is that people are going to do that evenings and weekends when nobody's around. This thing's full of businesses. Everything's displayed along there. We now already have a trailer stolen. We had a toolbox taken off the truck. We have a loader stolen. I just don't like through traffic if it doesn't have to be. I would really like if it could be coming off of 10. I don't know if that allows you. I don't know where that all comes into play.
Is it site distance, is that your problem?
It meets site distance, it's tight, but we do meet the site distance.
I know how that man looks there. I went over there to look at it, and I went up to Banco Technology, where their driveway comes out. You can see farther here
Yeah.
than you can up on top of the hill where Banco already is pulling out every direction with their trucks. I'm not against his plan here, but I don't like the through road. I'm just on that, I don't like it.
Yeah, I know through iterations that we've had with this, we had thought of coming through here and doing a cul-de-sac at this end. But in feedback from the township, it was, we were under the impression that you guys wanted the through to connect the town.
Won't that be a shortcut? You cut off, it would circumvent,
It's gonna be a
going
wide road.
through, going Todd Road, or, I guess Todd Road is the quickest way around
Right
here.
now, I can take Poplar.
They take Poplar.
More than not, it seems like.
So,
I have great concern,
so if you meet site distance, can it really stop you from having a full,
I'm sorry, let me correct that. That for the left in, coming in, we don't. Because the trucks that stop would be stopped on the road.
it's to the south, the site distance to the south?
Yeah, so coming this way, looking that way.
Okay.
So up on that, where that hill or ridge is, you start losing. So if a truck was sitting
you get up to
here
the top of the hill.
waiting to come in, you don't have that sight distance for a car or something to stop on top.
And that property that's across the street, they probably got that next security. Yeah. To annex some of that on the east side, to get a drive-by. I know that's a significant expense, but,
Right.
we'd have to waive the cul-de-sac length, I would imagine, which probably wouldn't be that big of an issue. What kind of traffic calming or traffic deterring things can you do? I mean, Levi makes a valid point. I mean, if already there's been theft in there, and
The other thing I'm concerned about, people coming across that mountain, if they're people want to turn off, there's not a whole lot of room.
Where's that?
If they're going north, coming over that hill,
that's what he's saying.
Yeah,
They
that's
left
why
turn.
they wouldn't be allowed to turn in.
Yeah, that's why PennDOT is right now saying that if you're coming north on Penn, you cannot make a left into that development because of the site distance. So that would be the concern if we were to make this its own cul-de-sac street. that PennDOT, because PennDOT has control of that intersection because 10 is a state road. The township can tell their thoughts, but PennDOT's the ultimate authority. So PennDOT would have to allow that intersection to be full movement in and out, in order for us to have that cul-de-sac street. So,
And if you do go with this plan, is that center island is gonna be something that's not mountable? So that, because if it's mountable, they'll go in there anyways.
It's raised.
It'll-
It's not, it is a mountable curve, but it is raised.
I
There
think,
will be signage in and on that.
I think PennDOT did have a comment. You sent me, Mike sent me over the PennDOT review letter on their entrance, and I think PennDOT did have a comment there, to design that, like, horseshoe island, to really prevent that left turn, from going in.
Because if you don't, they'll use it anyways.
Okay, so any other comments on the zoning or the road? Because then I'll go on to run through some of the Saudo comments quickly if there's anything. Like we said, they're going to fully develop their plans, for the landscaping. Want to have some general discussion, so.
What is the legal cul-de-sac allowed to be before you're just moved?
Like 8 or 900 feet.
I think so. I'll pull it up on the township website in a second. But they have some drafting comments. It's number 3, number 2 is the standard improvements agreement. 4 is the plan scale. They are asking, our plan scale is supposed to be 1 inch equals 50 feet or less. They are asking for a partial waiver to allow the title plan, existing features plan, and the overall layout plan to be drawn at 1 inch equals 100. I don't have an issue with the title plan or the existing features plan. The overall layout plan, generally where they show your curbs, your parking spaces, things like that, I think that should be at 1 inch equals 50. Those items are replicated on the grading and some of the other plans, but generally like to have a very clear layout plan, because that one also shows your stormwater easements and things like that. That is one of their waiver requests. To do sewage planning, which it's all public sewer, right?
Correct.
Okay. And water.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's public sewer and water. So sewage planning really revolves around ensuring the sewer authority has appropriate capacity for them. They'll have to provide further design details for the street extension, roadway profiles, and things like that. The sewer and water authorities need to approve those items. They are providing hydrants within the facility that meet the distance requirements from the buildings. They'll have to show that they have a certain minimum water pressure through there, and then the fire department will review access and things for each lot and the street itself to make sure it's accommodating to the fire trucks. They have all their outside agency reviews. They'll have DEP, like you said, the sewer authorities, Route 10, through PennDOT. The other one's right away with their second waiver request, which if you end up with a separate cul-de-sac street would not come into play. But where they transition from the existing cul-de-sac into the extension, that bend there, curves on streets are supposed to have a minimum radii of 150 feet, and that one would be less. So they're requesting a waiver for that. And street signage, clear sight triangles. They did submit a traffic impact study that will be reviewed through there. Couple basic driveway, design comments as they refine the driveway and parking. They'll extend the road curbing, which is what's in Westbrook Drive now, so if it is extended and connected, it would match the existing curbing along the streets. Street lighting is something the planning commission can provide them some feedback on. It's required at street intersections, but if you feel that any street lighting is necessary along the street itself, you guys can provide feedback on that. They have a waiver request to use pins instead of monuments. They have some development that encroaches on a PP&L aerial transmission line. They'll need to get approval from PP&L for any of those improvements or, crossings of their easements. Required landscaping, this is a major land development, so that will need to comply with the ordinance requirements. So a future submission will give you guys the calculation of required landscaping, versus proposed, so you can review and comment on that at the time. They do need to do denser screening buffers against any residential use in agricultural district boundary, which there is an existing dwelling behind lot 4, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, around lot 4.
Almost
Yeah.
in the middle.
So that's generally the Saldo comments. So I don't know if you guys, we talked about the road, which is part of, all the road design is within Saldo. So we have that, and if you guys have any comments specifically on site lighting, if you think there should be additional street lights along the street itself, that would be a good comment to provide at this time so they can incorporate that in their next round of revisions. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts of whether street lights need to be provided along the roadway itself.
I would think that businesses would want street lights if there's crime and things like that already. I think that would deter it.
Levi, is there street lighting on the other part of Westbrook Drive? I couldn't remember.
Yes.
On lot 3, like the northeast corner, the wetlands and the buffers like stop in a straight line. That looks a little odd to me. It looks like that encroaches into lot 3. Is there a reason why that's not shown that way?
So the way DEP defines a stream allows for perpendicular 150 feet off of the end of that stream. So the stream starts where we show it, and then 150 feet.
Yeah, they're showing, let me see. They were showing additional buffers on here, like the township has a 75-foot wide riparian buffer. DEP has a 150-foot buffer that they look at in conjunction with their NPDS permit. Same thing, township has a 10-foot wetland margin, and they were showing a 35-foot margin, which I believe is a DEP requirement. So the way some of it bends, I think that line that you're pointing to from there is their 35-foot wetland margin and part of their other DEP buffers.
Yeah,
So
so I don't know if you can see,
Is it intermittent or ephemeral? I can't read that. It looks like, so you're telling me the stream starts right on that perpendicular line, and there's no buffer above it?
no, this one,
Looks like the
that's a
stream
wetland.
so everything like to the west of this is just wetlands, or it's not defined.
You said it's kind of the start.
That's the
stream.
start of
So it kind of
So the stream
starts.
starts there,
Right,
but
goes this way.
there's no buffers.
But there's some wetlands over here, yeah, this is a DEP definition of how they require that buffer to be drawn.
How about how we require it?
Through there. Our stream ends, I think it's, The repairing
It's
is
just odd.
75%.
Just odd that it stops in a straight line.
Yeah, I'll double check how our definition is.
Because I would think our buffers would kind of follow around to kind of close the circle.
We'll double check on that, and then that will all, their DEP buffers will all be reviewed as part of their NP.
But you've done your stormwater,
DES
you've done your soil and infiltration testing for the basin?
Yes. Yeah, we've done this extensive.
It doesn't infiltrate, does it? That's why you go to rate control.
Yeah, the basin here, no infiltration along the bottom here, just high, what we got was a lot of high groundwater.
So they have rain gardens and subsurface infiltration beds between and under the parking areas generally of the developed lots to do their infiltration and things in that area. So,
You see the rain garden, you don't really see the subsurface. It's hard to tell though. There's the rain gardens.
yeah, these are the rain gardens. Subsurfaces, there's a, it should give you a different plan. Yeah, these are the subsurface
Okay.
ones on your, I think it's the PCSM, utility thing, what do they call it?
Yeah.
PCSM sheet shows those. So they have a network that will drain into each other and they eventually,
There's,
get back to, right. So some of,
these are all the infiltration, or for these lots, are the infiltration beds, rain gardens.
right, and then the rain gardens on the north side drain back. There's a swale along the back there that drains down to the basin. And the ones on the south side of the road end up discharging into storm sewer, and it gets carried down and discharges into the basin, ultimately. So stormwater, like I said, they submit high-level design with the connections. Overall, their calculations, they have to clarify a couple, there were some discrepancies between, the specs in the pond reports and the calculations versus the details. And we always want to make sure that everything matches, to make sure the correct numbers are used in the calculations before we do a determination of compliance. But they're proposing that they can meet the rate control design for, it drains in two directions. The majority of all the developed area will drain to that basin through there, and they're showing they can meet their rate controls, which is the post 10-year storm has to be a lower rate than the pre-2-year storm. The larger storms, like 50 and 100, have to be less than the pre-development 50 and 100. So they're showing they can comply with that for all the development. There's a small area, go back to your initial plan, yeah. There's a small area to the south of the lots that are being developed on the south that drains down towards Todd in the front of those properties.
So what about through here is a ridge line existing? So pretty much just the back portion of these lots will run south. So that's the part that we're asking about, only matching storm to storm rather than having a reduction.
Right, I think all the impervious area from those lots does get into stormwater facilities go to the north. It's like a grass bypass area through there, and there's a stormwater force main that comes out to Todd through there. So in that area, they're asking for that drainage. They're reducing the drainage area there.
Stormwater force main?
No.
Did I hear that correctly?
You probably did. A sanitary force main, which would make more sense. Sanitary force main, I have no idea what I said. But the sanitary force main will connect down into there.
Is that gonna require easements from the other property owners?
Yes, so from Levi and his son James, we'll get easements from them.
And the other question I have, the point of interest that's shown on the up north past the level spreader or your discharge, is that due to where I think it still floods there. I think there by Swiss Pond.
I believe this is right where the culvert is.
Okay,
Where
I
the
guess,
stream crosses.
I just know that that area has held water over the years, drive that much in
Right, so they are showing a substantial reduction in the peak runoff rates going there. It's a very substantial increase, the reduction, in those flows going in that direction. But for that area that's draining out to Todd, since it's mostly just open land that's draining down that way, they're asking for a waiver to allow them to just meet storm for storm matches for that drainage area instead of requiring a 10-year to 2-year reduction. Like I said, all the development and new goes to the north, to that other basin where they are meeting the
So
Oh,
it's outside of the LOD? It'll be outside the LOD, there'll be no disturbance in that area you're asking for the waiver from?
No, it will be.
There will be.
Yeah, so it's a meadow to lawn, but no impervious would be going.
But no impervious?
No impervious, but yeah, it's their disturbance for running that sanitary line and, the bypass on the lower side of the parking and loading areas through there. They are reducing the drainage area that goes there, I think it's from about 5 acres down to 2-ish.
Yeah,
But it's that change from in pre-development condition, you have to consider everything that's meadow, and then lawn has a higher runoff coefficient through there. So they are asking for that waiver in terms of stormwater. There's some, cleanup in stormwater, that once we get more detailed design on the storm sewer inlets and those networks, we may have a few other comments, but their overall conceptual design appears that it will be able to meet most of the ordinance requirements through there. So, like I said, they wanted to get the plan in front of you guys for, initial discussions. So I guess they'd kind of be looking for feedback on, the roadway, connections itself. We talked about street lighting. There were some comments that thought street lighting was necessary for security purposes. And if you have any comments on the waivers themselves, you can choose tonight, if you would like to, make formal recommendations on the waiver request. So
We didn't see that thing.
the waiver, there's copies up there, I think I gave you one, it's under your PC packet.
You did, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll let you know, give you a summary of the waivers. From the Saldo, it was streets having a center line radii of at least 150 feet. That's for where the bend at the existing cul-de-sac where they would be tying in. To provide pins in lieu of concrete monuments for the lots. And then to allow a drawing scale of 1 inch equals 100 feet rather than 1 inch equals 50 for the title plan, which is the overall view of the tracks, the existing features plan, and they noted the overall improvements plan.
I can change that, Jen.
Okay.
That's fine.
So he'll amend that waiver to just be the title plan and existing features plan. So those three, I don't have any objection to. Stormwater ordinance, to allow the outlet pipe material, and this is when we went over it, for that basin that's on lot 4. The ordinance requires a concrete pipe for those outlet structures for the larger basins, and they're requesting to use the plastic pipe.
What's the size of the pipe? What's the diameter?
allow, I think that's the basin outlets, including energy dissipators, shall be 25 feet from the property line. So they're allowing it to discharge to an existing drainage easement that's within 25 feet of the property line. That's for the main basin, right?
Correct.
Okay. And as talked about, the peak flows for drainage area 2, which is going out to Todd Road, which is the area that does not contain any of the new impervious cover from the development. It's the change from meadow to lawn, associated just with the lower grading on those lots and that sanitary line to allow storm for storm rate reduction there. The intent of making a recommendation on any of these waivers tonight would just allow those items to kind of be solidified for them to move forward with plan revisions. Not have other issues, come up in the future related to these items. But that's up to you, if you guys want to make recommendations on those tonight. And then, like I said, if you have any other comments or feedback on road configuration, other, aspects of the development for them to consider, any feedback they can have so that they can revise the plans in accordance with our letter and further their design, and then come back to you guys with more refined plans for formal action at a later date.
So it sounds like the road issue is probably the biggest heartburn here that we're hearing. And I don't know what kind of suggestions you have for that. Do we want to take these waivers this evening and deal with them?
Separate from the road.
That would be separate from the road. I think, yeah, it would be separate from
I'm
the
not
road.
against it, I don't get involved. I don't know why that's.
On the monuments thing, our surveyor left, we could ask him, how, does anybody use monuments anymore? Don't you need a couple somewhere to establish control? Like maybe at a couple of places you could put some monuments in and do the rest in pins?
Yeah, I mean,
But,
ultimately, it's the cost to put in a monument is.
I understand it, I understand it's cost driven, but
Yeah,
but from a functional standpoint, if a surveyor would go out here in 20 years to have to lay this, 20 years, they'll probably be doing from satellite, maybe within, thousandths of an inch, but they still need something to set up and base their base plan on.
right.
So I think limiting to just a few at somewhere at one of the PCs or something, at one of,
Okay.
I mean, that's just my thought. I don't, maybe you only need 2, or maybe you need 4.
All right, so we could condition that waiver if you make a recommendation on it to allow the use of pins, provided that sufficient monuments to establish control.
Well, let me ask you this, what will PennDOT require? Will they require monuments at the right of way?
That I can check.
Because if that's the case, then maybe the other monuments aren't needed because they could be used for control.
We could monument those at the entrance. And then the pins are out along the rest.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. How, the rest of you is okay with that?
You could take those as a
Can we
whole.
take them all together
You
if
could
that's,
Is that gonna make for difficult travel with like a tractor trailer or something. Yeah.
Do you know what radius you can get, Mike, at that
So right now,
cul-de-sac? And
yeah,
have
right
you
now
run
it's
the
at
trucks?
100.
It's what?
At 100,
Okay.
so they would be able to make that turn.
But you don't have anything going in there right now that would actually be turning. Everything going through there would be going straight into the existing.
Did you run through a turning radius? You run through?
That I can do.
Yeah, we gotta do that.
Yeah.
I feel like
I
it's
mean, typically that large a radius is a lot more than a truck.
So you can either do your waivers and reference Commonwealth's May 25th letter and exclude that one until they can show you that they can make that. Or, like you're gonna add the condition to the monument one, add the condition that provided a sufficient truck turning diagram can be provided, you know, showing compliance. So, either way.
You'll run it with full-length, semi. Do you run them with double trailers? Actually, they don't need as much. And also the longest fire truck that they have.
Right, yeah, so ultimately we do all that, yeah. I don't have one for the fire truck, but once we get a hold of the,
What's 47, 40?
but typically the semis making it,
Yeah.
fire trucks.
Yes. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, I think that needs to be looked at because that could be.
To answer the question from earlier, just while we're talking about the street, the saldo requirement is a maximum length of 800 feet for a single access cul-de-sac street, and that's measured from, would be from the intersection of the center lines at Route 10 inward to the center point of the circular turnaround for the cul-de-sac. So 800 is the ordinance requirement. So a waiver, if that were to be pursued, a waiver from that requirement would be required.
That first one, Aaron. The first request.
Or like a feasible truck turning diagram.
Yeah, successful turning radius of a detailed computer generated.
It's turning diagram to the satisfaction of the township engineer, and then I make them do all the right trucks and everything else, if that's simple for you.
How about we take that one separate, so that because it's getting a little
Yeah.
wordy.
Okay.
So if there's support for that, the motion could be relief from the 150-foot radius to allow a 100-foot centerline radius, provided the results are approved by the township engineer regarding the turning
Radius of the
radius.
largest trucks that was surfaced.
Is that okay? Does that make sense? If that's the case, then is somebody willing to make a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so a motion, we need a second.
Second.
Okay, if there's no further questions, all in favor of recommending the relief from section 22608, .2.a of saldo to the supervisors, based on the motion that was stated. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Now, if it's okay with the planning commission, to take the rest of the waiver request, which would be Saldo section 22-621, which provides a partial waiver to allow pins, provided monuments are provided at the PennDOT right-of-way. The next one would be to change the, did you say you're gonna make them all 1 to 50? Is that what I heard you say?
For the improvements plan.
They're requesting the waiver for the
The
title
title
plan and
plan
existing
and-
features.
Okay, so, like page, I don't know what page it is, but the title plan and existing features. The request is for that only to be, to provide relief from 1 to 50, to allow them to do 1 foot equals 100, 1 inch equals 100 feet. Then under the stormwater ordinance section 2301A 1D2, to allow the outlet structure or material to be smooth line, high density polyethylene instead of reinforced concrete pipe, and the dimension of that outlet pipe is 18 inches. The next waiver that we would include with the group would be from section 2311A5D, which is to recommend relief to allow the basin outlet structure, or basin outlet and energy dissipator to discharge to an existing drainage easement located within 50 feet of the property. And then the last one would be for that bypass area that we were talking about earlier. That's section 23081A, and that would recommend the supervisor granting relief to allow post-development peak rates for drainage area number 2 to be reduced to pre-development peak rates of light design storms. So I guess pre-post is the way to say it. So they're the waiver requests that are in front of us. If it's acceptable and someone's willing to make a motion to recommend to the supervisors that they grant relief from those items as described.
I'll make the motion.
You have a motion, need a second? Okay, are there any further questions or comments on any of the waiver requests? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Okay,
So just, that takes care of the waiver. So street lighting, you heard that with the road. It's probably feedback that you guys should pass on. I don't know if the board's going to want to weigh in on it too. Do you want the applicant to discuss with PennDOT the feasibility of having that be a full access intersection that would allow for a cul-de-sac, a separate cul-de-sac street, so that those would not be tied together?
but how are you gonna do that if you have a cul-de-sac, you're still gonna have the same problem of the left turn in going north. Or
Right,
you're saying
that's why
they
I'm
need-
pushing it to PennDOT. Like,
Maybe-
PennDOT would have to allow that. In order for the township to say, we want that to be a cul-de-sac street, and for that to be feasible, PennDOT is going to need to make that decision. The township can't override PennDOT and say, you have to allow that left in there. So, you know, you can ask them to speak to PennDOT again to see if they'll reconsider their position. But I think that's as much as you can necessarily
If you
do at this point.
pull your entrance to the west, is it possible to get a bypass lane on the northbound? If you say you have plenty of sight distance to the north, and the problem is northbound, left in, what if you pull your entrance in a little bit to get a bypass lane? I know it's an extra cost, I know it's not a lot of units to spread it over, but
Yeah, I
the
mean,
concern's legitimate.
So you would be taking that additional right of way that you would need, you would be taking from themselves, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
This would shift.
or go talk to the neighbor and see, that would be the easy way, but I'm guessing that's not gonna be the case.
no, I think that would probably, it would be easier probably for us to pull it in than to get additional.
You looking over at Tony? Does Tony have to make that decision?
No, Tony does not have to.
Okay.
But
Somebody has to bring to some.
one point, I mean, if we do pull it over and take some property away from what we have, wouldn't you still have the sight distance problem at the top of the hill, looking north, and people coming down? Wouldn't you still have that problem?
I don't know exactly where your high point is, but if you get a bypass lane, you'll be able to, as long as it's long enough, I guess, to have whatever the stacking distance is.
I mean, it'd be a discussion with PennDOT.
Absolutely.
Well, why don't you run the distances first
Yeah.
and see if it's a possibility?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys are just asking to investigate whether there's improvements or things that can be done there that would allow that separate cul-de-sac street to be considered. Is that the general consensus of the?
I think that's what being asked.
I'm getting head nods.
Because then, if you do that, then you can do the two cul-de-sacs. And I think we'd be willing to recommend relief from the length of the cul-de-sac, and then they probably would want, problem is, the roadmaster's not gonna want, he's not gonna want a cul-de-sac. He's not gonna want a cul-de-sac. He's gonna want to have straight to the road.
Actually, Larry Johnson is fine with it.
Oh, is he? Okay. Well, that's good.
All right, check in.
Very
I like
smart.
it. I like it.
I mean,
I got that from.
that concern, but also the shortcut concern.
Okay.
I think that's gonna become a shortcut.
The other thing I see is, I mean, yeah, we said the sight distance, but there's curves and there's snaps. I'm just cautious on that.
It curves on,
Like the north side, how that curves down around the corner stuff.
Yeah.
they shouldn't have to be down that far. I don't know, look at it and see what you can come up with.
Yeah,
I think it's a legitimate concern to spend a little time on.
yeah.
Who fights with PennDOT in your office?
Us. Me.
Congratulations, Mike. You get another day of fighting PennDOT.
And I will just, Amy Heiner. That's our,
Oh, okay.
so he helps out a little bit.
Okay.
So is there anything,
Any other questions you have, Mike? Anything else that you would
I think
like for
that's-
feedback on?
That's the major one right now is,
Okay.
like, you guys are, you want a cul-de-sac. through. Yes.
Yeah, that's, again, like we said, that entrance there is, PennDOT's jurisdiction, so.
are they gonna be in front of supervisors? June?
I would think they would go for their waivers, to get approval on those.
You might wanna talk to them, because you're hearing it from us, but they're the ones that are gonna have to make the final decision.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, we can put that, generally I do a planning commission action letter, says what your recommendations are, so it'll note the waivers, and I'll note in there that about providing site lighting along the street and, the discussion about the cul-de-sac, that they investigate that, so that'll be in the letter that goes before the board, so they'll be aware of your position and comments.
Good, yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike.
zoning hearings for conditional use applications. So it was,
Yeah, your first one, okay, your first zoning hearing application for Levi's popular name, Levi Fisher, 973 Twin County Road. That's to allow the kennel structure to be within 25 feet of his rear lot line. That lot line is shares in common with an adjoining agricultural parcel, which I do not believe there's any nearby agricultural buildings on that property. But that's the request. I'm not sure if anybody's here for, oh, there, he's back there in the back, so if you guys have any questions about his proposal, you can feel free to ask. There you go.
What size is this kennel be like?
It's 11 by 25.
So it'd be non-commercial?
Yeah.
you're the kennel expert. You and Melissa were the ones that sat into that whole, ordinance and discussion and all.
Well, I personally, with something like that, just up against the farmland, not close residentials. I personally don't have a lot of problem.
About that neighbor. Have you spoke to your neighbor?
I mean, the one there along Route 10?
I believe it
Oh,
would be
the-
Dave Stalsus.
Dave Stoltz's. I mean, I had personally spoke to him about it, but he's pretty certain he has no problem.
All the adjoining owners will be notified of the hearing as part of the rules for the zoning hearings.
And it's not a big kennel, the non-commercial, it's not a big one, but still, no increase in value, it's all market ones.
So how does that work from a licensing standpoint then? Do they still required to have a license from the state?
Non-commercial, commercial. If you're non-commercial, if it's under 25, you have to have individual license.
Does the state still inspect?
For non-commercial? Yeah.
What's the closest resident that's not yours, how far is that?
It's
that
down
the-
there along Route 10.
Is that the Schiller property?
No, it's the red, is it Schiller?
To the right of your driveway? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the one that's coming up for sale, like,
For sure.
yeah.
Is there already something there on that path? Is it like a pad or?
Yeah, the shed sits there.
And is that gonna be demolished? Is that, you're gonna demo the shed, or is that what you're gonna use?
That's what I'm using.
Oh, so it's already there.
I think the prior owner had a kennel,
Yes, they did have one there. That's right.
yeah.
So you've already been keeping dogs there.
Right, and I am non-commercial, I mean, the state is coming in to, I'm being inspected now already.
Okay, so you're already operating it as a kennel.
Mhm.
And you bought it how long ago? Or,
That shed got moved there almost a year ago.
so it's been operating for a year as a kennel?
But I thought all the non-conformings were all dealt with on that process.
You mean as far as having to have a license before you?
Yeah, and having them identified. It sounds like this is not one that was identified.
I think the prior owner had a kennel license. But I know in the prior owner's plan, it was marked that the kennel buildings had to meet the setbacks. So I'm not sure if the prior owner had a structure there, in that location that they put where they weren't supposed to. But when he did submit his kennel application, I think it was several months back, we noted that the setback wasn't being met and that he would need to apply for a zoning hearing, which is how we got here.
So is there anything that we're asking for is a setback? Variance?
Yes, because the kennels are permitted by right, he's got enough lot area and everything, and meets all the other kennel requirements in the ordinance, except for the setback requirement there.
So what is it set back now?
One was showing
It's
25.
required to be 50 and he's showing 25.
So everything is within ordinance except for setback?
Correct.
What would be the odds of moving that back? Make it
A little closer to the road, I guess, a little.
I mean, okay. So are you making I guess, action in support of the request? Is that what I mean? And we should probably have a second as well.
So who made that for you? Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. So are there any other questions or comments? So what our recommendation would be that the zoning hearing board would support the request to reduce the side yard setback from 50 to 25. Any comments, further comments, questions?
You're not planning on expanding it or anything like that? It's just gonna be what it has.
Okay, if there are any other questions, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
So the Board of Supervisors will talk about it at their June, I think it's the 14th, whatever the second Wednesday is. And then you should be receiving, did you already get notification of when your actual zoning hearing is? June 26th?
Yes, I have gotten those dates, yes.
Okay, so so this, Board of Supervisors will have the same type of discussion and take either a position of support, no position, or against. And then the Planning Commission and boards, thoughts are passed on to the zoning hearing board, and then the zoning hearing board makes the ultimate decision. Okay?
Thanks.
No problem, thank you for coming.
the next one is a request from Jacob Esch, and this is to allow an accessory building to be more than 50% of the size of the principal dwelling.
Right, this is for an accessory dwelling unit. So the property right now is a 20-acre property located towards the very end of Pleasant View Road. Currently has a dwelling and then two manufactured homes on it, so total 3 dwelling units. They're looking to demolish the existing dwelling and one of the mobile homes and construct a new dwelling that has an attached accessory dwelling unit on it. I believe they're here, I'll let them comment in, but they're planning, the landowner owner's daughter and son-in-law, who currently farm the property, will live in the principal dwelling. And then the landowner, their mother will live in the accessory dwelling unit. She still has 2 children that live at home. One of the reasons why the accessory dwelling unit is larger than what we typically see. So there is a zoning requirement that for an attached accessory dwelling unit, that the floor area of the accessory dwelling unit be 50% or less of the floor area of the principal dwelling. They're proposing the principal dwelling to have almost 3,400 square feet in area, and the attached accessory dwelling unit to be close to 2,500. So it's over that 50% threshold. So they're asking for the variance. They do meet all the other setback and pervious requirements, so that is their only zoning relief that they're asking for. So they're here if you have any questions. Included in their application, they had written a couple letters of support for their justifications. So those are in the copies of the application, but they're here if you have any questions or comments about their request.
So they're demolishing 2 units.
Yes.
What was their total square footage if they include those 2 units existing? It wouldn't matter though, would it? It wouldn't. I was just looking at what their total square footage was before.
Of the dwellings themselves?
Yeah, before they.
They do have, one of these plans has a chart on here. The principal house right now is 2,022 square feet, and mobile home being demolished is 1,341 square feet. I'm not sure if that is floor area or footprint. That may be, which for the mobile home, that would be the floor area, but that was the footprint. They were doing an impervious calc to show that their net impervious cover was less than 1,000 square feet. But they may be able to answer about the floor area square footage.
Well, so if am I understanding this correctly, that they're removing 3363 and adding 2467?
No, they're building they're taking away those 2 existing dwellings. They're going to build one new house, that the primary part of the house is about 3,400 square feet of floor area between the first and second floor. Connected to that house will be their accessory dwelling unit, which will be an additional almost 2,500 square foot.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Clear that up.
Yeah, so they're doing an attached dwelling unit. For comparison purposes, if they had a freestanding dwelling unit, those are allowed to be, I believe it's 90% of the floor area of the principal dwelling. One of the drawbacks when doing a freestanding accessory dwelling unit is there's also provision in the zoning ordinance that you're supposed to place that freestanding accessory dwelling unit somewhere on the lot that you could ultimately subdivide it into a conforming lot. So that's why we do see a few variances, from that requirement. So, being that there's zoned ag with a 10-acre lot area minimum, it makes it difficult to meet that requirement. So they chose to do an attached dwelling unit and request a variance for the 50% limitation.
So where's the new house gonna go? Where the main house is now?
They have, let's see if she gave me, I have to give an updated plan. I think it's gonna be set back further than the existing house. Can you guys tell exactly where that new house is gonna go relative to the existing dwelling?
And it's gonna be farther back from Pleasant View Road.
On the opposite side of the driveway?
Yes.
Okay, so back here's They're existing, so it'll be on the back side of the driveway. Oh, here we go, I found it.
So it'll be back almost together in the barn.
So yeah, here's the proposed new
Yeah.
dwelling. If you want to pass that down.
It will be on the structure.
So I'm on the back side of the existing loop driveway there, and they're taking out part of that loop.
So everything in yellow is getting demolished.
Everything that's highlighted in yellow on your one plan, yes, is being demolished. So-
This one's staying, this one's going, I think this is the one's going. That-
That makes sense to do that.
Yeah.
So how many bedrooms does the ADU have?
How many what?
How many bedrooms?
The principal dwelling has 5, and the accessory dwelling unit has 4 bedrooms, is that right? I think that's what's on your building plans.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
But only 3 people are gonna be living in the accessory dwelling unit?
Yes.
Any questions, anything you'd like to add?
Don't think so. You have the plans in front of you, that's what we're proposing.
So what do you think?
Jen, is that typical for an accessory dwelling unit to have 4 bedrooms, like be that big, or?
I mean, sometimes they're smaller, sometimes you end up with it, somebody, you know, kind of converting space above a garage, you know, usually for an older child. Or they have an elderly parent that they want to take care of, which in this case, it is the elderly parent. Their different condition from what we usually don't see is that that parent still has other children living at home. You know, usually we have the point where the parents are, you know, maybe in the 70s and 80s and all the kids are out of the house. So that's the different circumstances here, which is generating, you know, the other number of bedrooms, so.
But we, like, I guess, how old are the other children that are living?
17 and 12.
17 and what?
17 and 12.
12, okay.
This is a 20-acre piece of property, too, correct?
Yes. Like I said, they currently have 3 separate dwelling units on the property, so they'll be going down, physically, when you look at it, it would be going down to 2. It's still the accessory dwelling unit connected to it, but it's within one structure versus 3. So in a way, they're making it less non-conforming. The 3 existing dwelling units on a single property is an existing non-conformity. You know, the attached accessory dwelling unit is a permitted use. So you would, you know, reduce the extent of the non-conformity, I guess, at that point, by doing it as an attached, you know, accessory dwelling unit.
I don't have a problem, so I make a motion to support.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? Motion and a second to support the request for relief, which will be submitted to the zoning hearing board. All in favor of the motion and second, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Looks like your next stop is supervisors.
Thank you.
Thank you. of,
The zoning relief will grant, that will be in the final decision, I would imagine.
right, it would be part, that's their intention, it would probably be a condition of that. And then in those cases where we have people submit building permits and they're demolishing another house, we put notes on, when you were to get a use and occupancy permit for the new house, it's always done as a temporary use and occupancy permit, and you're given either 30 or 60 days, it depends. I mean, if it's nice weather now, we're given 30 days to get the other house demolished and off. If we're in the middle of winter, sometimes we'll do 60 days.
But you can't get your final.
But you can't get your final permanent use and occupancy certificate until that. Other homes been demoed,
Okay.
so.
And if they get the relief, they're gonna have to do some septic testing as well.
Yeah, they'll have to go through, they have so many bedrooms, they'll have to go through sewage planning, because there's a total of 9 bedrooms plus the other bedrooms, which bumps them over 800 gallons per day, which requires planning module, and they'll have to go through the health department to have septic systems large enough to address all of the number of bedrooms in the unit.
And they won't get a building permit until they have that.
Yeah, they don't get a building permit until they have their septic permit, and they can't get their septic permit until they have their sewage planning module approved by DEP. So,
Under other business, there's the request to approve or not approve that Planning Commission sign a letter of support for the Penvest for the expansion of the Northern Chester County Municipal. It's not expansion, it's upgrades to the sewage treatment facility.
So Penvest is a grant application, and part of that grant application process, they're requesting a letter of support from the Township Planning Commission. So Christie drafted a letter. It says, please be advised that the Honeybrook Township Planning Commission has reviewed your wastewater treatment plant nitrification upgrade project as requested. Please be a participant in the planning of your important infrastructure project. The project will provide improved wastewater service to the residents of the township and borough by upgrading the nitrification treatment, as well as addressing the aging aeration and other miscellaneous plant equipment. Basically, it allows the authority to provide more continuous and reliable service. Our office has determined that your project is consistent with the land use plan, comprehensive plan, all other local land use and agricultural preservation of the area, and you'd be encouraged, Penvest, to provide the appropriate funding. So they're looking for authorization for Gary as chairman to sign that letter of support to go along with the grant application.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? I can sign.
I haven't voted it up here, so I don't pack it up with all this stuff. Thank you.
Okay, and then our final business item this evening is the Saldo revisions. Did you all get a chance to go through the revisions? Primarily, the focus is on open space. All the other stuff's really just housekeeping. But,
The only thing that jumped out at me with that was the section where it's dealing with flag lots. Did you get somebody by the flag lot at all anymore?
I think that's,
Further subdivision.
where was that? What article? What section?
22-604, page 73. Excuse me.
yes. So yeah, the prior requirement read, a flag lot once subdivided shall not be further subdivided without the provision of direct road access. And they're proposing to change that language to say further subdivision of any flag lot is prohibited. I think generally for the flag lot provisions that are in the zoning ordinance, for the lot width of that flag part that it allows, it's not actually feasible without a variance to subdivide that further in there.
But if it's a 50-foot right away going back to with the flag lot, or 50 foot, if they own the 50 feet, it's still
I mean, it's pretty general, it says, no further subdivision on the flag lot. It's not given sizes.
Right, I think there's requirements in zoning for what the minimum, like, flag width is.
But it's a subdivision of a flag lot.
Right, so they don't want you to
So if you're,
further subdivide a flag lot.
but if you're using the access of a flag lot for another property, that's not what it addresses.
No, it would be that you can't create another lot
Off your flag.
off your flag lot.
Even if if it was a 50-foot, it was big enough for a road improvement, you still be there with something like that. That's my question.
Well, it's in the saldo, so it's something that can be waived by the township on a case basis. So it's not a zoning requirement that would require a variance, it is in the saldo. I want to check the, I'm not sure if the zoning ordinance had, yeah, standard for flag lots. Let me just see what the zoning ordinance requirement is. It could be that we're matching what's in zoning. So that was part of the changes, was to make it consistent. The zoning ordinance was updated to go with the comprehensive plan. The zoning ordinance standards for flag lots says, in addition to the standards for flag lots established in this section 604, it says access strips shall be measured at the street line, shall be a minimum width of 25 feet for their entire length. There shall be no turns greater than 45 degrees in the access strip. Further subdivision of any flag lot is prohibited. So they're changing the saldo to match the zoning, which does prohibit further subdivision of the flag lot. So they're making it consistent.
They wouldn't consider a 50-foot right, go back into a flag lot then. It has to be 25 foot.
Right, if you're going to create a new flag lot now, your access strip would only need to be 25 foot wide.
Okay,
Right. So,
thank you.
yeah. Okay. Susan, I got your comments. Do you want me to go over those with the planning commission, or did you want to read those off and I can provide comments back on them?
You don't have to.
Okay. There are a couple in there that I concur with. Your definition of site, your comment about current residents for the purpose of the open space, your questions about curb maintenance. I looked, sometimes that's in municipalities have in their streets and sidewalks, or like a street, I don't know if it's street and sidewalks or streets ordinance, sometimes it's in there. Some of our municipalities have it added into the property maintenance code. I looked today and didn't see anything specific for Huntington, that they have an ordinance in the codified ordinances about the curb maintenance, so.
So we just let them deteriorate into dust, which is
That-
what's happening in my.
Well, that's my question, is I want to ask the township if they have, if there's any other ordinances. Sometimes there's older ordinances on the books. We find these in a few of the boroughs that we have that wasn't caught in the codified ordinance. So that is a question I think that I can pass on to them. I agree with you on definitions of active and passive recreation. Your questions about the riparian corridors, about the widths, and about the yards definitions, those are in zoning. So I think they're taking them out of the saldo to avoid confusion and conflicts. But those riparian widths and the definitions of the front and side yards and those requirements and regulations for corner lots are all in the zoning ordinance, which would trump the saldo.
Would it help to reference where they are, since those terms are being used in this part of the document, that in the definition just refer to definition and.
In zoning ordinance?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make that note. Okay. A couple of your definitions at the beginning, those are really tailored to 100 level of service,
At
multimodal,
the moment, 105.
are really tailored to the traffic study section. So those terms would be used there, so. So that was just a couple of those, that I thought should be, passed on, but if you want to discuss any of the others, you certainly can. Susan's the only one I got comments from, so you guys can feel free to put out other comments. Gary, I know you said you didn't get through everything yet.
I got through everything. And
Okay,
I'll send them to you in writing if you want.
that's up to you, how you guys want to handle this, so.
Most of them are okay. There's like, I don't have pages on mine, I don't know why mine did print page numbers, but review of the sketch plan. I think Park and Rec should receive a plan. It should be copied on the sketch plan. They took out, in that same section, 22-404, they took out Honeybrook Joint Comprehensive Plan, and I wondered why they took that out. Or maybe they just don't want, it says compatibility of the plan with the Honeybrook Joint Comprehensive Plan of 1993 or subsequent editions.
Because I think they define comprehensive plan now as the Honeybrook Township and Borough Multi-Municipal Comprehensive Plan of 2015. So wherever the term comprehensive plan is used within the saldo, it
That
refers
covers-
to your
okay.
2015.
All right, that explains.
So I think that's why they took those extra words out. Right, so sketch plan should go to Park and Rec.
Yeah, I won't go over all of them, but in the financial security part, and that's on the page that's right before recording the final plan,
Yeah.
about halfway down through that new edition. Financial security shall be the same type as permitted for installation of improvements, and the amount of the financial security shall not exceed 15% of the actual cost of installation of the improvements. And this is for the 18-month for the maintenance period. They should, I think they should add 2 of the improvements that are to be offered for dedication
Okay,
to clear that up.
yep,
This was my really comment. The township may undertake any repair any defect without previous notice. I think that's unfair. I think they should have noticed, uploads too.
so that was part of in case of emergency where delay would cause serious loss or damage. Was the beginning part of that,
I'm
but
not
you
sure
still
it's
think it's
okay.
okay?
I'm not sure it's. The bulk of my comments are, they changed the road width from local and private from 20 to 22. That's pretty typical, so I guess I won't whine about that. Streets grade shown, street profile costs are submitted and approved with a preliminary. Don't you look at your street profiles at the preliminary plan?
I usually do.
I just figured that you would be dealing with that preliminary. I know they really like roll curve around here. I wish they would consider slant curve. And the reason why is it would save the township money when they do their first overlay. And I've had this discussion with Don, and he disagrees. But, when you put in roll curve, you got to mill that. The first overlay you do, you have to mill it, whereas slant curve, you don't have to. Still gives you access to the property, the lot, the commercial location. But in there, it's now requiring streetlights shall be installed. I'm not sure that we want to make that a shall be installed, because there's the dark skies movement, there's site specific, there's light pollution to be concerned about. I think somewhere there should be some discretion. Like on that commercial area, I think that's probably okay on that street. But if that was backing right up to residential, I'm not sure that would be.
Okay, so that goes, the places, just so to make sure attention, the places that mentions they shall be installed, is that all street intersections,
It said-
including a dead end, and at all other spots considered hazardous by the township, which is a bit subjective, but that's where they're requiring them, not, there's not a specific spacing, but,
Okay.
if you still have concerns, that's
And why,
fine. I just
and
want
why
to
did
make
they
sure
change
it's-
it from generally to
That
shall
one.
be? Because that kind of gives you.
Well, I guess it wants shall at the intersections and the other spots, but it's still subjective along other ones of the roadway. But if you still feel generally should be involved, I just wanted to make sure it was clear
Just my.
that the shalls, the intersections and hazardous spots, so, okay.
And we'll be here all night if I get through everything on the open space. I don't understand what the purpose of the major change to the open space, because some of it is okay, but a lot of this is geared towards dedicating it to the township. I'm not sure that that's a good way to go. Because it could be a township expense. Also, I'll give it to you in writing, but as I go through this, the minimum area is, it says 2 acres, but then it only has to be 200 by 200. This thing gave me a headache, I gotta tell you. I don't understand, this almost reduces what the township could put in place on a development, the way I read it. And it looks like it's geared towards bike paths and walking trails. Looks like what the intent of this was. And I think I understand who was driving this, so I guess I understand that, why they did that. But there's just a lot of details. I don't know how you want to deal with this. I think the suggestion we should send our comments in on the open space and then have them take another run at it so that we can look at it.
More a substantial rewrite of the rewrite
Because
of the open space.
I would not support this,
Okay.
this particular change of redoing the whole system.
Right,
You know, there's things in their homeowners association that they make no mention of adequate capital reserves. It's just, and
That's fine,
I was gonna call Beth and talk to her about it, but I think the best thing to do would be to just send my comments, and you can share it with anybody you want.
right, I think we can give a general opinion, and let me know if this isn't speaking for the whole planning commission, but based upon what I heard last meeting, and some discussion at the beginning of the meeting, and Gary's comments now, is you guys do feel this section as now written is, like Gary said, more towards just dedication of land, not the actual providing of the recreational facilities themselves.
And
And you guys have concerns
there's
over that. and
there's no
future changes
basis
to
for the
township.
costs either.
Okay.
So if the supervisors want to consider a fee in lieu of, there's no basis of what that fee in lieu of is, it's discretionary, and I don't think the community, nor do I think the supervisor should be put in the spot that it's a discretionary number.
Right,
I don't know if every development needs to have everything that's listed for the basketball court, the tennis court, and the multi-purpose field, but at least you could look at those costs and say, okay, if you don't want to do it, here's the fee in lieu of. But the way it is here, it's like figure in 1,500 square foot for a single family, and that's going to be the open space. It doesn't go into detail whether they can give you the wetland area or whatever. I just think it's more geared to fee in lieu of, and fee in lieu of is okay given certain circumstances, but we gotta have a basis of what we're determining our costs on.
Okay.
It's just less, I see it as, I don't know what the rest of you saw, but it just looks less restrictive than what we have now. And typically, that's not where ordinances go. They usually go to be more beneficial to the township.
Is that the general consensus
Yeah.
of the planning commission regarding the open space and recreational changes that should be passed on?
Oh, I definitely concur with Gary's comment on it. Okay, it was very difficult slogging through that, which the way that it's written
Yes,
is,
very confusing.
yes.
I had the same comment. You know, I had to reread it a few times. I'm like,
Yeah, what is this trying to say?
what's it trying to say? And I came out with the same consensus at the end, and I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to, like, you know, 2 playgrounds and 4
Right.
basketball courts? And
Yeah.
that's, you know, was my thought when I first read it as well. So we
Yeah.
can pass that around. That section itself needs another, another try. So, and that you guys want specific regulations, you know, recreational facilities and.
And if the supervisors and our recommendation, or the planning, or the park and rec, they say, look, it doesn't make sense for them to build these facilities here, then go pursue the fee in lieu of.
Right,
But this right out of the box
right.
is,
Yeah, so, and
it's
that's
like
what,
a
we
fee
talked
in
about
lieu
that
of,
last
and
month. You want the opportunity for Park and Rec to comment.
I think every development or development almost needs to be looked at site-specific.
And you want to have every option of either making them with the requirements and or.
Right, okay.
I don't, has this been made, is this even available to the community yet?
I don't know that.
I think we ought to, my suggestion is we ought to send our comments in and get them consolidated. And if we have to sit down and talk to the supervisors with it, but make sure we kind of get what we want. And then let it, I think the community would probably appreciate having a look at it before the supervisors approve it. Wouldn't you? Would you like to see it before it goes out? And I think our goal is to try and make it better than what's being proposed. And I don't think the current supervisors had anything to do with this. I think this was from the previous manager, and he was directing the solicitor to.
Yeah, but didn't they have to review it before it went to you?
I don't think so. Did they?
I think they never authorized it to be sent to you. So it doesn't mean that they had to review it and be okay with it. I think they had to send it to you because they wanted input,
Before they.
you know, on it before they made decisions, because you guys are on the planning aspect, you know, of the land development plans and those coming in, so.
So I'll give you my comments, so it won't be until next week.
No, that's fine. I'll pass on the general high overview, and then I have Susan's individual comments. If you have more, Susan, feel free to forward them over. And then if you guys do have individual comments, feel free to send them to me, and then I can pass them all on to the township for everything in detail to be looked at.
And once you get everybody's comments and get it consolidated, and I mean, dump it on you, maybe Christie can do it, or somebody in there
Yeah,
can
we
do
can
it.
send them all,
And then send it back to us.
Yeah. so you can get everybody's,
See everybody else's good ideas. Of what
Right.
they think.
okay, I can do that.
Can it be put out for public comment? Is that what you were looking for?
Well, this is just my thought. My thought was, let's get all our comments together and get them consolidated. And then that would be the time to send them to the supervisors. And the supervisors, I would think, would want to share them with the community before they took action on them.
Right, or maybe that they take your comments, have this revised, you know, and then send it back out before they put it out for
Yeah, and maybe they.
public comment. But at some point, ultimately, before it's adopted, they do have to, you know, authorize, I believe they have to authorize it, you know, be advertised, that there will be, you know, it'll be on the further agenda, and,
Yeah,
I think at
even,
that time, it has to be put out to the public, but
even
I
the
think
grammatic things have to be,
Yeah.
they'll have to do that.
right, your comment is that ahead of that mandatory, you know, put out, just during the advertising period, that the public should have an opportunity to comment before then. It's usually, once it's been advertised, you can only make non-substantive, yeah, sure. Substantive, that word, changes to it before it has to go back through the process again, so.
This is that's what the changes are recommending, so but the biggest change by far is the open space.
You sent out an email, didn't you, John?
With the whole status, yeah,
Yeah.
Christie had put that out at last month's agenda.
Call in there and tell them to break the one off.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah, but she can write you one. Yeah, it was in last month's packet, that's when we initially talked about it, so.
Make sure you have a read.
Yeah, it's 136 pages.
And you're not.
How many?
136.
Is that what it is?
Can I find out that while I'm thinking that?
So, okay, so we can pass those, done things along, and then once I have everybody's comments, I'll compile them, or have the county staff compile them, and we'll.
So is the
Get
only
them
ones
out
that are
there.
really changing are the ones in red?
That's correct. They're the changes. And it's either struck, you know, that's good, they want to eliminate, or it's in red what they want to add.
I've seen some of the numbers, they start the paragraph with the red number. I'm not sure what that-
That's a new paragraph. Or it's an old paragraph they're taking out, if it's strict. It's fun reading.
Fun reading.
It's okay. You just gotta like be able to focus on it, because it doesn't flow very well.
Okay.
All right, go back to moving forward on any matter. Anyone, yes?
Can I just ask again, in your comments to these revisions, if you could make it up to the township to decide whether or not the developers, regardless of what housing type, has the option to mandate open space instead of fee and low?
Well, yeah, that was one of the frustrations of the change.
Yeah.
It kind of was going to fee and
The
lieu,
other
was
direction where
kind
they
of the
could
first
take
thing.
the decision.
You can almost do fee and lieu right out of the box. And, yeah, I think I understand your point, and
Yeah.
I think we agree with your point.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Sorry that we went so long tonight, but it's been a while since we had a long agenda. So if there's nothing else, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? Aye. Great.